It was 22:30 local time, July 2nd, 2025. Hidden under a tree line sat a Ukrainian Vilka M launcher, its crew of 4 preparing to fire on a Russian ammunition depot. 4 missiles were loaded, guidance systems warmed, and the crew expected a routine strike. Then everything changed. The gunner's passive receiver spiked, the unmistakable signature of a Zoopark 1M counter-battery radar sweeping from 38 kilometers away. Every man in the cabin knew what that meant. Their position was being tracked. Once confirmed, Russian BM-30 Smerch rockets could be inbound within minutes. The driver asked softly, "Zoopark?" The chief gave a single nod. They all knew why. Just 15 minutes earlier, they had fired a harassment salvo, enough to give the radar their trace, enough to bring down fire. Silence filled the cabin. The routine was over. From that moment, the mission had become a race against time and survival. At 22:32, the first wave of pressure hit them. The crew's tablet, used to upload precise target coordinates into the missile's guidance system, suddenly flickered. GPS bars dropped one by one until only a weak signal remained. The Russian electronic warfare units had begun their work. "Jamming," the gunner muttered, his voice tight. He tapped the screen, trying to hold a lock. For a few seconds, it clung to the satellites, then collapsed into static. The Vilka M required exact coordinates for each launch. Normally, this was a 3-minute process. Pull data from satellites, verify accuracy, and load it into the missile's computer through a secure link. Tonight, they didn't have 3 minutes. They barely had 90 seconds. The Vilka M is Ukraine's most advanced homegrown rocket system, engineered by the Kyiv Design Bureau. Each missile tips the scales at 800 kilograms, with a 170-kilogram warhead designed to smash through reinforced concrete. Its guidance package blends GPS, Russia's GLONASS, and inertial navigation, delivering precision strikes within 10 to 30 meters, even at maximum range. But there was a catch. Uploading coordinates, while Russian radar tracked their position, turned every launch into a gamble with deadly stakes. The crew chief snapped, switched to manual. The gunner obeyed, bringing up pre-surveyed coordinates stored from earlier reconnaissance. Without GPS confirmation, the system defaulted to inertial navigation, far less vulnerable to jamming, but unforgiving if the input was wrong. A 5-meter error here could mean the missile missed entirely. Sweat ran down the side of his face as he typed in the numbers. His hands shook, not from fear, but from the weight of precision. One wrong digit, and everything was wasted. In the back, the loader kept glancing at the sky, listening. Somewhere far off, faint but distinct, he could already hear it, the distant thunder of Smerch rockets, launched from Russian positions. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Each man knew what those sounds meant. The hunter had fired, and the prey had only moments left. At 22:34, the Vilka M roared to life. The first missile shot upward, ripping open the night with a thunderous blast. The entire 30-ton launcher rocked under the recoil as the rocket streaked into the sky at more than a kilometer per second. There was no time to celebrate. The crew didn't even watch the trajectory. The gunner was already authorizing the second launch, fingers flying across the tablet, while the driver twisted the ignition and brought the 8-wheeled transporter's diesel engine rumbling to full power. Seconds later, the second missile thundered away, leaving a tall column of shimmering heat visible to every Russian infrared sensor in the region. Then came the sound they had dreaded. From the north, incoming Russian rockets. The Zoopark had done its job. The crew had less than 30 seconds. The third missile fired at 22:35 sharp. Its launch was so violent that windows shattered in abandoned farmhouses 200 meters away. The protective heat coating on the launcher's tubes began to blister under the stress. They were pushing the system past safe limits, but there was no choice. "Last one," the chief barked. The fourth missile launched just as the first Russian BM-30 Smerch rocket slammed into the earth 400 meters north of their position. The explosion tore a crater into the soil and sent shards of metal whistling overhead. The shockwave rattled the cabin, making the driver's teeth clatter. The driver floored it. The transporter lunged forward, gears grinding, the suspension groaning as it tore across uneven ground. Behind them, More Smerch rockets crashed down, bracketing the area they had just occupied. The Ukrainians had revealed their position, but their 4 missiles were in the air, streaking toward the Russian depot at supersonic speed. The question now was simple. Could those missiles survive the gauntlet ahead? By 2236, the 4 Ukrainian Vilka-M missiles were clear of friendly airspace, climbing high before curving toward their target. At more than 1,100 meters per second, they would cover a kilometer every second, faster than the human eye could track. Inside each missile, the guidance computer was working furiously. Every fraction of a second, it cross-checked its inertial sensors, adjusted for drift, and tried to catch faint navigation signals through the haze of Russian jamming. It wasn't elegant flying. The satellites were gone, the signals corrupted, but the triple redundant systems kept the missiles on course. Far below, the Ukrainian crew's world was shrinking to the rumble of their transporter's engine. Behind them, fire and shrapnel from incoming Smerch rockets clawed at the empty fields they had just vacated. Survival depended on forward motion now. At 2238, the lead Vilka-M descended through 8,000 meters altitude, crossing into Russian-controlled territory. It was now inside the first engagement envelope of the enemy's air defenses. Russian radar operators were already tracking them. In a dark cabin 28 kilometers ahead, a crew of the Tor-M2 air defense system watched their scopes come alive. The target blip was unmistakable. A ballistic rocket, fast and on a direct trajectory toward one of the most valuable depots in the sector. The Tor's commander gave the order. Within seconds, the system's phased array antenna locked on. Firing solutions calculated. The engagement zone was set. At 2240, the Russian operator pressed the launch authorization. With a metallic clang, 2 interceptor missiles shot upward, their rocket motors igniting and accelerating to nearly Mach 3 in just seconds. Bright tails of fire marked their climb as they curved toward the incoming Ukrainian missile. It should have been routine. Ballistic rockets were predictable, their paths easy to calculate. The intercept window was short, but the system was designed for exactly this. The Tor's crew expected a kill. But the Vilka-M wasn't flying predictably. At 2241, the Russian Tor-M2 fire control radar locked firmly onto the lead Ukrainian missile. Its antenna poured focused energy into the sky, feeding constant updates to the interceptors racing upward. On the operator's screen, the engagement seemed simple. The incoming target was fast but ballistic, following a predictable descent. All the computer had to do was place the interceptors at the crossing point. For a moment, confidence filled the cabin. The Tor was one of Russia's most trusted short-range air defense systems. Against aircraft and cruise missiles, it was lethal. Against a ballistic rocket flying straight, it should have been a guaranteed hit. But the Ukrainians had prepared for this exact problem. At 22:41:15, just as the interceptors neared their predicted intercept point, the Vilka-M's flight computer executed a pre-programmed maneuver. The missile banked 15 degrees left, then corrected back toward its target, altering its descent angle by only a fraction. On radar, it looked like a small wobble, but in missile combat, that wobble was everything. The interceptors, already committed to their path, missed by a wide margin, exploding harmlessly as proximity fuses triggered in empty air. The Russian crew didn't have time to dwell on the failure. The Tor's commander barked for a new solution. 2 more interceptors launched in quick succession. At 22:42:10, the Vilka-M adjusted again, this time a 20-degree right bank with a subtle pitch correction. The maneuver stretched its flight path by only a few hundred meters, but it completely invalidated the Tor's firing solution. On the operator's scope, the blip suddenly veered off the intercept line. Alarms chimed. The crew scrambled to switch to manual mode, trying to correct in real time. The second volley exploded closer, within 50 meters of the missile. Shrapnel peppered its aluminum skin, tearing small gashes, but the critical systems held. Its gyroscopes detected a slight deviation, and within milliseconds the onboard computer corrected the trajectory. Still on target, still descending. By 22:43, panic was rising inside the Tor cabin. They had fired 4 missiles, half their ready load, and the Ukrainian rocket was still coming, and behind it, 3 more Vilka-Ms were entering their sector. The hunter had become the hunted. By 2244, the Russian air defense network was fully awake. The Tor M2 crews had failed to stop the lead Ukrainian missile, and 3 more were now streaking behind it. Orders rippled through command channels. All available systems engage. 12 kilometers east, the crew of a Pantsir S-1 scrambled to bring their turret around. The system's search radar had already picked up the incoming rockets, but they were approaching from a difficult angle, low on the horizon and masked by terrain. The turret traversed nearly 140 degrees, grinding as its fire control computer recalculated. "Target lock!" the operator shouted. The commander gave the order, and 3 57E6 interceptor missiles, 2 aimed at the lead missile, 1 at the second rocket, against doctrine, but driven by urgency. The calculations weren't perfect. The incoming Vilka Ms weren't behaving like the computer expected. Instead of a straight ballistic arc, they jinked and wove, performing small program corrections to throw off intercepts. Every maneuver forced the Pantsir's computer to recompute, shrinking already razor-thin reaction times. At 2245, the first Pantsir intercept detonated within 70 meters of the lead missile. A flash of shrapnel tore through the night sky. For a moment, the Russian crew thought they'd succeeded. But on radar, the blip continued. Dented, perhaps, but still steady, still on course. Meanwhile, further west, a relic of the Cold War rattled to life. On the northern perimeter of the depot, a ZSU-23-4 Shilka was already tracking the incoming threat. Its ancient fire control radar buzzed, trying to separate the missile from the clutter of ground reflections. The gunner didn't wait for perfection. At 2246, he squeezed the trigger, and the Shilka's 423mm cannons unleashed a storm, over 3,000 rounds per minute. The crew knew the odds. At speeds above 1,100 meters per second, the Ukrainian missiles would cross their engagement zone in only seconds. But doctrine demanded they try. For 3 seconds, the Shilka roared, a wall of lead clawing at the sky, then silence. The barrels smoked, the tracers faded, and still the blips advanced. The Russian defenses had thrown everything they could in those first minutes: Tor interceptors, Pantsir salvos, and Shilka barrages. Yet at least one missile was now less than 20 kilometers from the depot. The clock was closing in. By 2247, the Ukrainian missiles were inside the last stretch. Less than 30 kilometers separated them from their target. Russian defenses scrambled, but the window was narrowing with every passing second. Operators at multiple batteries shouted updates over radios. "Target at 3,000 meters!" Closing fast. The data was chaotic, fragmented. Jammers, ground clutter, and overlapping radar beams made precise tracking nearly impossible. At 2248, the lead Vilka M descended below 1,000 meters altitude. For the depot's defenders, this was the nightmare range. At such speeds and altitudes, engagement was brutally short, only seconds to detect, aim, fire, and hope. The Shilka gunner braced himself again, radar beeping frantically. He squeezed the trigger one last time. A hail of tracers filled the night, but the missile tore past at 3 times the speed of sound. The shells detonated harmlessly behind it, as though the weapon was firing at a ghost. Then came the moment of silence before the storm. At 2249, the missile's proximity fuse detected the warehouse roof just 5 meters below. Its 170-kilogram warhead detonated. The explosion ripped through the structure. The eastern wall collapsed instantly, sending masonry and steel flying outward like shards of glass. Inside, stacked pallets of artillery shells cracked open, their contents igniting in sympathetic blasts. A rolling fireball surged skyward, illuminating the depot like daylight. 30 seconds later, the second Vilka M hit the northern warehouse. Its warhead punched through the reinforced roof before detonating inside. The explosion was even more violent than the first. Dozens of BM-21 Grad rockets, each packed with solid fuel, went off simultaneously. The blast hurled a 15-ton roof panel into the air, flipping it like a toy. At 22:49:30, a third detonation echoed across the depot as the third Ukrainian missile tore into the western storage building. This warehouse held advanced warheads and submunitions. The blast tore open casings, scattering burning propellant and igniting a storm of secondary explosions. Fire rolled outward, devouring everything it touched. Within 60 seconds, 3 warehouses were burning. By 2250, the depot was a furnace. Flames leapt from shattered roofs, curling hundreds of meters into the sky. Each Ukrainian missile had done its job, but the true devastation was only beginning. Inside the ruined buildings, the fire met fuel. Pallets of Grad rockets erupted like giant fireworks, some igniting and spiraling upward before detonating mid-air. Others blasted sideways, slamming into fences and vehicles, leaving streaks of fire across the compound. In the western warehouse, the munitions stockpile went next. Heat and shock tore open canisters, scattering bomblets that exploded violently inside their crates. The effect was catastrophic, a storm of tiny detonations rattling the structure to its core. By 2252, the 4th Vilka M slammed into what remained of the eastern depot. Its warhead plunged into a structure already consumed by fire, but the impact only accelerated the chaos. The explosion added new pressure to a system already collapsing, pushing the fires into untouched storage rooms. Minutes later, the flames reached a far more dangerous prize: S-300 surface-to-air missiles, stored in crates. Each missile held more than 130 kilograms of high explosive, plus solid rocket fuel. When the first went off, the explosion ripped through the compound like a hammer blow. Windows shattered in nearby towns. Civilians miles away stepped outside, staring at a rolling fireball on the horizon. For them, the night sky had turned into a battlefield. Then came the worst. At 2255, the fires dug into an underground bunker where dozens of BM-30 Smerch rockets had been stored. Propellant charges ignited almost simultaneously, feeding into a single massive detonation. The ground shook as if struck by an earthquake. A crater nearly 40 meters across ripped open the earth, hurling tons of dirt into the air. A mushroom-shaped cloud climbed skyward, lit from below by the hellfire of the depot. For kilometers around, car alarms blared, glass shattered, and soldiers dropped flat to the ground. Russian firefighting crews, still kilometers away, stopped in their tracks. There was nothing left to save. The depot wasn't burning anymore. It was erupting. By 2256, the depot was unrecognizable. What had been neat rows of warehouses and bunkers was now a sprawl of twisted girders, collapsed walls, and fireballs leaping skyward. By 2305, the depot was fully out of control. Ammunition still detonated, but now the fires had merged into a single blazing mass. It wasn't a depot anymore. It was a burning, cratered wasteland, spewing flame like a volcano. Russian command tried to coordinate emergency response. Orders were barked to firefighting units, but no one dared drive closer than 2 kilometers. Temperatures near the depot exceeded 1,800 degrees Celsius, hot enough to melt steel, hot enough to ignite vehicles at a glance. At 2310, the sky was still glowing as though dawn had arrived early, but it wasn't sunrise, it was destruction. 4 missiles had rewritten the landscape in less than half an hour. Where once lay stockpiles meant to fuel weeks of artillery fire, there was only chaos, flame, and ruin. By the time the clocks passed 2311, the battle was over. The missiles had done their work, and the depot was finished. Russian commanders scrambled to assess the damage. Reports filtered in through the chaos. 4 warehouses gone, entire bunkers destroyed, vehicles and equipment reduced to wreckage. Preliminary tallies suggested that over 3,000 tons of ammunition had been lost in under an hour. For an army that relied on constant barrages to grind forward, this was a crippling blow. In the hours that followed, the panic spread. Orders were issued to disperse stockpiles. Ammunition once stored in bulk was broken up into smaller caches across multiple facilities. The intent was to prevent another catastrophe, but the effect was the opposite. The more they spread their supplies, the more vulnerable their logistics became. Every shipment required more trucks, more fuel, and more time. Efficiency was sacrificed for survival. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian crew that had launched the strike was already gone, their Vilka M transporter hidden beneath another tree line miles away. They listened to the distant rumble of detonations, still rolling through the night, and knew they had escaped death by less than a minute. The Zoo Park radar had painted them. The Smerch rockets had fallen, but they had fired first and hit where it mattered. By midnight, videos of the strike lit up social media across Europe. Grainy clips of fireballs, shockwaves, and towering plumes spread faster than official reports. Analysts began calculating the scale of the loss. Commentators noted how a single launcher, in a 6-minute window, had shifted the balance in a contested sector.
We are now learning that Ukraine has successfully hit an ammunition depot deep inside Russia.
For the Russian troops who had manned the depot, the lesson was brutal. No stockpile was safe. For the Ukrainian crew, the lesson was simple. Survival came down to seconds and precision. When the fires finally burned out days later, nothing remained of the depot but charred craters and skeletal beams. The war would go on, but in that moment, under the twilight sky of July 2nd, 2025, 4 missiles had rewritten the battlefield.